Hello everyone, welcome to the controller. And today topic is about cover the controller. What is controller, how we can create the controller, why we need them, need these controllers. And let's first take a look at what is MVC. Laravel is MVC based framework. So what is the meaning of MVC based? So MVC based means that model view controller. So you can also take a look at these pictures. So it means that, let me open some pictures here. So this one is a good example. So in this example, first user will send request from the view to controller, and controller perform a logic like it send it to the database. For example, we are fetching the user from the database, so controller will fetch the user from the database and get it back and then render it to the view again. So it's a MVC based. So we created our routes, and now the time is to create controller. So let's move to the documentation. We are in the Laravel 8, which is the latest version, and if there is any latest version like Laravel 9 or 10 comes, I will also cover those ones with updating our existing project to newer one. So let's start it. This is a basic controller. What is basic controller? So let's say, so basic controllers means that, look at the example of node that controller basic controller includes with Laravel. So there is already a controller exist in our Laravel application, which is base controller. Okay, so this is our directory of the project. Let me close this file also. So you need to go to the app directory, and inside the app we have HTTP directory. Let's click on this HTTP and then click on this controller. So the inside the controllers directory we have a base controller, right? And it's extending the, we have a controller, this is extending the base controller, and we can say that this is the base controller, right? And for example, we are going to create a new controller. Our controller will be resides there, right? And yes, they are talking about single action controller. So what is a single action controller? If a container is particularly complex, you might convenient to determine an entire class to a single action to accomplish this define and invoke method. So it means that if you have only one route which is accessing something from the controller, which is only singular function, so you can without defining the function name, you can call this by invoke method. You can define invoke method in your controller, and you can access it by providing this provision server like your controller name and class without passing function name. So that's it for a single controller, but we are going to not make this single controller. We will use them in future. So let's go to the project directory, and I'm going to create a controller here. Okay, you can also watch then I read out the command from the documentation. So documentation says that PHP Artisan make controller and the controller name. So we are not going to make the controller invocable, so that's why I'm not going to put this flag here. Okay, let's create new controller. So I'm going to create a controller PHP Artisan. So you need to type a command PHP Artisan. So this is a make controller, right? And you need to type make controller, and here you need to specify your controller name, and your controller name should be singular. So this is a best practice, and Laravel by default also suggests us to make the controller singular, and this should be the first letter is capital. So I'm going to create a user, and you need to also add controller with all. So it's a best practice. So when you are switching to your controller, you know that it's a controller, it's a model and stuff like that. So PHP Artisan make controller, and it's a user controller. Let's hit enter, and it says controller created successfully. So let's go to the http directory controllers, and inside the controller controller is created, right? And how we can use this controller? So in the web.php file, so let me go to the web.php file. How we can find this? Go to the routes directory, and inside the route we have a web.php view. So let's make it a little bit cleaner. Okay, and remove these routes also, and yes, now we have only 2 routes. So I'm also going to remove this route and make this again home page, right? Save this one. Let's go to the web page, and yes, we are on the home page. So now the time is to get rid of this closure, and there is a lot of stuff, so that's why we are preferring it controller, doing this by controller, not this closure. So how you can call this user controller in your route? So I want to access this controller, so I need to put an array sign, and here I need to define the controller name. So I'm going to I'm going to add user controller. So let's click on user controller. So it's added the user controller at the top. If this is not added by automatically, you can add this by use http and controller by full path from viewing the left sidebar. Okay, and then you need to type a class here. So, and the next one is you need to pass a parameter here. So this is a function name which exists in the controller. So I'm going to create this index into this user controller. So let's open this user controller, and the functions are almost public, so that's why I'm defining it public. And here you need to define this index method, and this is a parameter of the function, and that's it, our function is there. So if I want to hello, I am index page, so it means that when our index method will be hit, so it will execute this statement, right? So let's go to the web.php file. When we access this route, this will execute this controller, and this controller should be execute this index method. So let's refresh it on the web page, and yes, it's now returning hello, I am index page. So we are doing it without closure, we are doing it with the controller. So that is the beauty of controller. When we have multiple routes, so it's easy to organize our project structure, right? So we have only one method, which is index. So let me put it like users. So we are going to create a CRUD of users, so that's why I put it users. So it's a get, and we need to put a users here, like this one. So it will users, and yes, it's running, it means that our route is good. So you need to also make them as plural, because it's a best practice. You can make them singular, or it's upon you, but the best practice is you need to make them plural. And I'm going to assign it a name. What name? Users, right? And yes, that's it. Now we can access this route by typing this route, and inside the route we need to define this name. Now the time is to move to the parameterized route. Okay, let's go there and create a new route here. So it's a users slash I'm putting here an ID, right? And the second parameter should be controller, should be user controller, and we need to define a class, and here we need to specify a method name. So I'm specifying this show. So by default, if you are creating a resource controller, it will automatically put them these index show, and I will cover them in future. It's a show. It's not only show, it should oh, we need to make them singular, right? I already told you that these URL should be plural, but these names should be singular. So let's put this user dot show, and this is users. I'm having an ID, and let's go to the controller and make this show method. And you can also press control and click on it, so it will open this user controller, right? And here we need to define a new method, which is a show, and yes, show method. So let's go to the web browser, and we need to type ID here. So let's 5, and yes, it's displaying that show method, right? If I want to get this ID in my controller and pass, so you can pass this, you can receive this from here. If you specified this ID or some variables like there something or ID, you can get this parameter in your controller. If you have multiple variables here, you can also get these multiple variables in your controller, like comma slash age, right? For now we have only one variable, that's why I'm only getting the one. So I'm going to show this ID. So I'm going to concat this. My ID is, so it's ID like this. So let's refresh the web page, and it says my ID is 5. So let's make it 20. So it's, yes, it's now saying that my ID is 20. So it means that our show method is successfully working. Let's move to the route file. This is a web.php file, and if there is multiple routes, like we have a resource route, so I will explain that in a minute, how we can check that how many routes are there. So there is a command, so let's clear this, and the command is php artisan route, and need to put a colon here, and it's a list, so it will show you to all the route list. So for now we have only 2 routes, it will display these 2 routes. So let's open this in a bigger, and yes, it's having this API user. It's added in the Laravel by default. Let me show you. Open the api.php file, and yes, it's added user. So it's only having a user. Why? Because API is a prefix, it will automatically added here before the users, so that's why this URL is there. If I comment this, it will not going to show anymore. So let's php artisan route list, and yes, now we are only displaying these 2, and this is a CSRF cookie. So this is a advanced concept, so I'm going to enable this and remove this file. So we are having this these 2 routes. First one is users, which is hitting this controller, and the controller method is index. So let me hide this. Okay, and the other method is also get method, and this get method URL is this, and this name is this, which we passed it here, right? And this is hitting this show method. You can check your on controllers routes.